just in the past 4 decades, the percentage of jobs requiring some form of post-secondary education has skyrocketed. It used to be close to 25%, and now it's over 60%. By 2020, it's projected to climb closer to 70%. So 70% of all jobs will require some sort of post-secondary education. But today, less than half of Americans have a recognized degree. And worse, we now have declined from being in the #1 global position to being 14th out of 37 developed nations in the percentage of young adults that have attained higher education. So our belief, CED has been a long supporter of education, but our belief is that educational institutions need to collaborate with businesses and independently raise not only the number of workers who have higher education, who are engaged in that, but also work on the quality as well. So to begin this session, we're very pleased to have longtime CED member Ed Rust with us. Ed is the chairman and CEO of State Farm Mutual, and this company and Ed have a very, very long history in supporting education. It is really due to Ed's tireless commitment to education, having served on the boards of the American Promise Alliance and the Hunt Institute for Education Leadership Policy. Ed has also chaired the Business Higher Education Forum, Business Roundtable's Education Initiative, and has served on the No Child Left Behind Commission. If there's any one CEO that I think of when I think of education's involvement, businesses' involvement in education in a positive fashion, the guy that comes to mind is Ed Rust. And we've invited him today to kick off our conference with some remarks. So Ed, please join me.
Thank you, Steve, for those kind remarks, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here with you today. I want to compliment CED for its continuing work in the area of education and workforce development. Like CED, a number of us have been involved in this area for many years. Together, we have made progress over those years, but frankly, not nearly enough, nor fast enough. What gains we have achieved are today being threatened, and in some cases, even lost. The rigorous learning standards we have fought for through the years have been hijacked today by a growing debate around assessments and accountability. States and local authorities are struggling to raise the necessary funds for education and to, more importantly, to allocate those in effective ways. The competitive world of work has dramatically changed right in front of our eyes, and we are not keeping up. The convergence of big data, cloud computing, enhanced data analytics, machine learning, mobility, and the Internet of Things is reshaping how we must think about work and the necessary skills and experience required for tomorrow's growth and success. These are indeed interesting times, and our focus on competitive work skills has never been more important nor so challenged. Jim Hunt, many of you know, former governor of North Carolina, is fond of telling the story of his transformation from being a jobs governor, the first 8 years he served as governor, then an 8-year gap, and the next 8 years as governor of being the education governor. And he tells the story in recognizing in those first 8 years as governor in North Carolina, focused on jobs. It wasn't until that intervening 8-year period before he was elected a third time that he realized really it's education that drives jobs. You think about it, trying to create jobs in the absence of talent is nearly a mission impossible. And that was Jim's point in looking at moving from a jobs-focused governor to really around education and training development. The jobs of yesterday are increasingly just that, yesterday. Our efforts today must be on understanding and developing those skills and experiences that enable tomorrow's successes and job creation. While there are exceptions and obviously pockets of excellence across the country, long-established learning models are struggling, some even failing, to achieve the necessary outcomes that assure every student an opportunity at success as they enter the world of work. As business leaders, this directly impacts our ability to find people who on day one are prepared to learn, to grow, and contribute to the success of our own endeavors. Here are some of the statistics. Only 81% of students graduate from high school on time, and it's a much lower rate for minority and poor students. This is coming at a time when students of color now represent majorities within our public schools, and a high school diploma is no longer enough for successful movement into the middle class. For those who do graduate, barely 2/3 subsequently enroll in a 2 or 4 year program. Even then, 20% of those who do must take remedial classes. Sadly, enrolling in 2 or 4 year programs, it does not guarantee successful completion. Only 31% of students at a 2-year institution earn a degree or certificate within 3 years, while just 59% of students at 4-year institutions complete it within 6 years. Consequently, we have approximately 5 million young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are not engaged in either education pursuits or work, which translates into an unemployment rate for that group double that of older workers. We clearly have a talent pipeline problem. The world some of us grew up in, where America had no economic competition and universal education was able to produce massive numbers of lower skilled and higher paying middle class jobs, has dramatically changed and has forever altered how we must today respond if we are going to remain the world's leading economic power, providing opportunities for high standards of living for all. Why should we be concerned about this? First, the world is catching up with us and clearly understands that economic growth is driven by an educated workforce trained for the global economy and global competition. Secondly, our own demographics in this country are becoming a significant drag on our economic performance. Our population growth has slowed, it's aging, and the number of young people entering our schools and the workplace has declined. And those who are entering are far more ethnically diverse than ever before. Here are some of the numbers. Less than 20% of the current U.S. population is under the age of 15. That same cohort makes up 32% of the population in Egypt, 43% in Kenya, 30% in Peru, and you can go on. In most developing countries, it is a larger percentage. Why is this important? When you think that the youthful populations are growing in countries that are also showing higher growth in education achievement. The last PISA exam given to 15-year-olds in 65 countries was a clear sign of what's happening. The U.S. used to be number one in this internationally benchmarked exam. Now we're average at 15 in the world when it comes to reading, below average at 27th in math, and just average in science when compared to the other 64 countries. Performance in higher education isn't much better. We were number one in college graduation, now we're 12th. And finally, today's workplace is changing in other ways. Increasing global competition, the broad adoption of technology, the breadth and scope of computing power, and fewer young people entering the workforce is having a definite impact on the workplace and structures of organizations going forward, with fewer employees and dramatic increases in the necessary breadth and level of education and skills required for success. Today's workplace is not the workplace of yesterday. On average, 50% of workers have been with a company less than 5 years, with 25% less than a year. Every year, more than a third of the entire labor force here in the country changes jobs. It was interesting in some of the contrast in the world of work and within the work environment. I remember as a youngster going to a big manufacturing facility not far from my home in central Illinois. Walked in, this is back in the mid-'60s, dark, dreary, noisy, cluttered work environment, assembly line, people climbing all over what was being built. Taking that picture and fast forwarding to a couple of years ago, you go in the same plant, clean, bright, the just-in-time management of the supplies coming in, fantastic, remarkable, dramatic shift. What more, as you looked at this, what I remembered from 40 years ago of people all over the assembly line floor, today you go in and you look, here's a skilled technician, assembly line, robotic, skilled technician, robotic, and so forth. The world of work and the environment, as we all know, is dramatically different than what many of us grew up with. And this is resulting in two fundamental truths. Our economic success depends on an education system that can keep pace with the escalating demands for higher and broader-based skills. And our economy increasingly depends on the successful education of those low-income and minority students that historically have been left behind. Due to the demographics, those young people are now needed more than ever in entering the workforce. While our education systems continue to work towards improvement, simply providing more of the same or modest incremental change will not ensure Americans are prepared for the escalating expectations of tomorrow's workplace. Over the past years, the business community has worked to enlighten the public and policymakers regarding the changing demands of the workplace and the necessity for educating all of our students to higher standards. We have talked about the skills gap, but to date, we have not effectively struck the proper chord of understanding within the general public. Too many believe that their child will be fine with the education that worked for them when they were in school years ago. Last fall, the U.S. Chamber Foundation issued a report on managing the talent pipeline. In the survey of executives, they found that 92% believe there is a serious gap in workforce skills, and that 50% of them struggle to fill job openings. More than 75% of manufacturers report moderate to severe shortages of skilled workers and expect that problem to grow. If this trend isn't reversed, the skill gap by 2020 could result in more than 5 million unfilled positions in the workplace. You know, the skill gap isn't just about unfilled jobs. You think about the economic consequences of people not being employable or not being able to find a job many times because of the lack of skills. The economic toll that takes on the country is huge. Some of the challenges that is found in a study by the Gallup organization where only 11% of business leaders have confidence that college graduates are well prepared for the workplace. Meanwhile, 96% of college academic officers feel that colleges have done an outstanding job in preparing youngsters for the workplace. Now, don't misinterpret my comments. The systems of education that we have in place, we need to help them through significant change, which is not easy to come by. In our own organizations back home, as we have fought to bring about necessary change to remain competitive in this dramatically changing competitive market, we need to help educators do the same. The future of American education and training systems must be built on a new, strong, interactive partnerships between business and education. As business leaders, we must take responsibility with the educators to establish real-time systems that communicate to the providers of education and training programs the continual change that is taking place in technical, social, and applied skills within the workplace. We must impress on educators and policymakers the need for all students to be educated to a career or college-ready standard. Our future competitiveness increasingly depends on successfully educating those traditionally left behind. We must continue to address the skills gap of entering and current workforce members by identifying and supporting essentially what you might call micro-academic or skills certifications. We must communicate directly with education and training providers to ensure that these micro-competencies are being built into traditional degree and certification programs. We must also work with educators to recognize and support the changing delivery systems impacting education. Online, mobile, shared learning, contemporized apprenticeships, and internships, just to name a few, are rapidly redefining where, when, and how learning takes place. We must also work with K through 12 and higher education leaders to provide applied learning opportunities and mentors. Employers increasingly look for such experience in new hires and expect them to be contained in the degrees and certification programs of the future. We must work with post-secondary educators to build formal, recognized programs that reinforce with students, educators, policymakers, and parents that proven curricula and credentials are valued and are recognized by employers. And we must align hiring practices with the standards we expect of educators. As education and training providers respond to the needs of employers, job applicants must be assured that those same standards and credentials will be respected by employers. The education and skills standard of tomorrow's workplace is not static. It is being defined as we speak. The content and competency expectations are rapidly changing and require new and formal partnerships that ensure continuous communication and accountability for results. There must be national partnerships on data gathering and communication. There must be industrial partnerships reflecting industry-recognized certifications. Must also be local partnerships providing internships and mentoring. And there must be community college and university partners for high-demand occupations. You have at your seats today a recent, I think just coming out in the last week, comprehensive study done by CED and looking at 4 key communities and what they have done as a business community in helping to address these. My comments here today are essentially a short cliff notes of what that document outlines. And several of the people involved with that will be on the panel shortly. But I just point out, business has a critical role in helping our institutions of education to help move them into, call it the 21st century, and addressing the skill sets that young people are going to need to be gainfully employed and enjoy the benefits of being a citizen of this nation. As I said, this is a partnership. I think back, and as you look at much of the education reform effort, business must be that consistent encouragement, pressure for change. Because when you think about it, you may have as a teacher, in full disclosure, my son is a math coach for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in Brooklyn. Young kid going from Central Illinois, has been in New York for 15 years, but is very much involved in teaching. And he and I have conversations, and it's interesting because probably all of us in this room were a little more focused in our children's education and went to PTA meetings or what. And as we interfaced with the teacher, we would push, why aren't we doing this? Let's expand this. We need tougher assessments. Kids need to learn with the pressures of life, i.e. assessments, tests. We would push on that. Some teachers would look, you're right, let's work together. Others would look and say, well, you know what, your son or daughter's going to be out of here in 9 months, and then you're gone. Business comes in, we're not in it just for 9 months. It's 12 months this year, it's 12 months next year, and so forth. We are that constant engagement, constant partner in helping to move this issue forward. It really comes down to the leadership of business and the engagement of business groups like CED and others. The paper I referenced, which we'll touch on shortly, is a guide for anyone who asks, how can I get involved with this? What ideas do I need? What resources are out there? It's really how, as business leaders, do we help our employees, our communities, our customers, our vendors become more informed and better consumers of the education system and helping it address the needs of our young people going forward.